In generations to come, children will be told a story. They'll be told that once upon a time, Europe was divided. There was a big wall down the middle of it, and the people in the East were very poor, and they had no democracy, and they lived under an evil system called communism that killed millions of its own people. But joy of joys, the wall came down, and we finished up with 27 nations, and those people lived in democracy, and 500 million people lived in peace. But sadly, no, there is more. I promise you there's more. Bit of extra time. Thank you. I should just sit down now. Well, I must say, that's the first time I've ever received such applause, and I'm tempted, Mr. Verhofstadt, I am tempted to sit down, but if I may, sadly, the story continues, the politicians in charge became very greedy, and they wanted money for themselves, and they wanted power, and so they resorted to lies and deceit, and they staged the most spectacular bureaucratic coup d'etat that the world had ever seen. But they didn't need to use any bullets to do it. They were much cleverer, much more scheming than that. No, what they did is they put in place a new treaty. It was called the Lisbon Treaty. And then they gave 27 people total unlimited power. These were to be the people that made all the laws. Of course, they already had a flag and they already had an anthem, but they went about building a new state. But they ignored the people. And what they did, whether they knew it or not, is they recreated the very evil system that the people in Eastern Europe had lived under before. But the incredible thing was that many of the new bosses had also worked for that same evil system before. Well, of course, the plan was flawed, and their fanciful monetary scheme collapsed. But still, the new bosses wouldn't listen to the people. No, They made life tougher and tougher. They put tens of millions into poverty. They denied people a say. And in the end, those people had to resort to violence to get back their nation states and their democracy. And the moral of the story is they had learnt nothing from history. Members of the European
Mr. President.
Before you give this Commission power, remember
Thank
that
you,
60
Mr.
years
President.
ago, an iron curtain came down on Europe.
Thank you,
that now,
Mr. President.
with this Commission, there is an economic iron fist, and it's being felt in Greece today. We cannot build.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of Europe of Freedom and Democracy, Mr. President Nigel Farage, the floor is yours.
Well, this grand occasion, Mr. Barroso, your State of the Union speech doesn't, I think, quite put you on a par with President Obama, because there is one fundamental difference. He, of course, is elected, and you are not. And 48 million people watched his address, and here in the European Parliament, we even have to beg to get the MEPs to turn up to listen to you. And you completely ignored the State of the Union. You said how you felt things were going. You pointed your way forwards. The Eurobarometer poll, the Commission's own polling organisation, tells us the truth, and it tells us that in the last 6 months there has been a dramatic drop in confidence in people's belief even in belonging to the Union. A 10% drop in Germany, a 17% drop in Greece, a 9% drop in Portugal, and less than half of EU citizens think that being a member of the club is worth it. Even more revealing is that in your own country of Portugal, in the last 6 months, a further 1 in 4 people have lost total faith in EU institutions. That, Mr. Barroso, is hardly an endorsement of success or belief, and yet from most people today there seems to be this great self-satisfaction. Well, don't be too satisfied, because the people have worked it out for themselves. The real State of the Union it is loathed and despised. And yet some claim this is because they want more Europe. Mr Verhofstadt said people want more common policies. No, the evidence is clear. The evidence is clear. Interesting, President, when I barrack people I get threatened with fines, but never mind. Never mind. The evidence is the more common policies there are, the less people like it. People have recognised the devastation of the common fisheries policy. They've recognised the inequality of the common agricultural policy, the lost business opportunities of the common commercial policy, and of course now the big one, the common currency. This ill-conceived political attempt to force people into a monetary union without ever asking any of them whether they wanted to be there. Well, it's perfectly clear that this currency doesn't suit Germany and it doesn't suit Greece. One is now trapped inside an economic prison, and you can pretend the crisis has gone away, but it hasn't, because the bond spreads are now 8% on 5- and 10-year bonds. You can smile, Mr Schulz, but you know nothing of financial markets or how these things work. And in your own country, well, why should the German taxpayer increasingly pick up the bill? This form of government isn't working, and yet what we heard today is we're going to have a common defence policy and a common foreign policy. And the other reason why these polls are where they are is people don't respect you, because you cheated to get the Lisbon Treaty through, and we were told it would simplify everything, that we'd know where we stand. Well, we don't. Who is in charge of this EU? Is it you, Mr Barroso? Is it my old friend Herman Van Rompuy? Is it the Belgian presidency? Now that really is good stuff, isn't it? You still can't form a government in your own country, and yet you're presidents of the European Union. I mean, whichever way you look at it, the whole thing is a bit of a dog's dinner, isn't it, really? The EU has never had so much power, and yet it has never been so unpopular. But not satisfied with the €2.4 billion a year that is now being spent on EU propaganda, you want the overall budget to increase by 6%, and personally, you ought to have a full-time TV crew, we understand, to traipse round with you, new press officers, new webmasters. You're not analysing why this is going wrong, Mr Barroso, you simply don't get it.
Dziękuję.
Thank you.
Mr Nigel Farage, co-president.
The row over the Roma in France today is of course caused directly by failing European Union policies. It was a huge mistake to allow Bulgaria and Romania to join the European Union whilst there were millions of people, millions of Roma in those countries being heavily discriminated against. It is no wonder that now they're part of the Union, they're seeking to move elsewhere. And this goes with everything, doesn't it? Every single one of these policies fails, leads to a problem, whether it's this, whether it's the euro, and all the way through we see this fanatical political ambition to create a United States of Europe, regardless of the consequences, and at no time has any of this been endorsed by the voting public. That, Mr Barroso, is the true state of the Union.
Quand on a fait rentrer des 27 ou 28 nations tellement éloignées les unes des autres, la distorsion devient de plus en plus grande et effectivement, comme le réel prime toujours sur le fictif, et le fictif, c'est l'UE, c'est l'euro, c'est le pacte de stabilité, et c'est tout ça qui est en train d'exploser. Hein. Et pareil, si ça explose pas, le coût social est tellement vertigineux qu'à un moment donné, le pouvoir grec dit entre sauver l'euro et sauver nos fesses face à une colère populaire et à une violence, une crise économique qui entraîne une violence sociale de plus en plus grave, on va être obligé de faire des choix. Et là, c'est toujours la même question. Hein, c'est que il est sur le papier, l'Union européenne et l'euro sont déjà morts. Hein, pour moi, et ils ne peuvent être maintenus que de force, de manière fictive, et contre les peuples et contre le concret, la réalité économique et sociale. Donc, oui, c'est-à-dire qu'en fait, c'est quand est-ce que tout ça va péter, et plus on retarde, plus ça va péter fort. C'est ça l'idée, quoi. Donc, c'est tout ça crée des situations de type un peu à la fois absurde, pré-révolutionnaire, et tout ça, c'est l'Europe de demain, c'est des États en faillite, un euro qui ne veut plus dire la même chose d'un pays à l'autre, dont il faut absolument se débarrasser si on veut arrêter la catastrophe, un pouvoir bruxellois qui ne veut rien entendre C'est un peu comme les sionistes de droite, qui ne veulent rien voir à la réalité, mais cette réalité va leur péter dans la gueule un jour ou l'autre. On est face quand même à une oligarchie complètement autiste et isolée, qui s'appuie sur des abstractions, et qui, au nom de ces abstractions, veut que ça suive, alors que plus rien ne suit. Et c'est ce que Lénine appelait à un moment donné l'éternel retour du réel, c'est qu'à un moment donné, ils vont se prendre le réel dans la gueule, sous forme de révolte populaire, enclenchée par une misère populaire. Et c'est vers ça qu'on va.
Fix it. I have permission. No, me no. Yes, I have. Please.